We live in a world of screens, short attention spans, reels, TikTok, sound bites, headlines, all competing for your attention. How do you communicate so that people want to hear what you have to say?
Welcome to Your Intended Message, the perfect place for leaders and promising professionals who want to convey the intended message for greater success. Every week, we interview experts who address the challenges and best practices to deliver your message effectively. That might be one-to-one, one-to-few, or one-to-many. And perhaps the most important conversation, one-to-self. I'm your host, George Torok.
My guest today is David Reich. Here's 3 facts that I think you should know about David. 1, he is a technologist, thought leader, and business executive with over 30 U.S. and foreign technology patents. The guy's an inventor, as well as 6 books and hundreds of trade press articles and lectures worldwide. 2, he's also a professional magician, mentalist, and hypnotist, which gave him a unique take on human perception and effective tactical communications. 3, he's a former semi-professional bicycle racer, as well as a triathlete, helicopter pilot, avid camper, and scuba diver. Looks at life and the world as something to be explored, as well as how to make a positive impact. Sounds like it's been a busy life and he's still busy. David Reich, welcome to Your Intended Message.
Thank you very much for having me. It's a pleasure.
Delighted to be talking with you today. And I imagine that life as a magician, mentalist, and hypnotist does give you an unusual perspective on how we communicate and what influences our behavior and reactions to communication. What are some of the key lessons that you took from that experience that maybe we can start doing ourselves to be better communicators?
Sure. Well, there's lots of aspects to it. The biggest key really is observation. We have to look at other people. We have messages. We have things we want to say, product we want to sell, an idea we want to convey, a joke we want to tell. And we have to not only know what we want to say, but how it's landing. And that's actually how I came up with this whole tactical communication method, because as a magician, as a mentalist, as you're going through your performance and your communication, you need to see how things are landing, where people's eyes are, and if it's working and if it's not. And then, and this takes a bit of practice, okay? You can't do it overnight, just like anything good requires a bit of practice. But you can start to tailor your message and tailor how you're communicating real time on the fly to make your message resonate. And that's how you get people to want to hear what you have to say.
Now, that's a curious comment, where people's eyes are.
Mm-hmm.
What might that tell you?
Well, a lot of people will think, oh, if somebody's looking up to the right, they're lying. And if they're looking up to the left, they're searching for an ad. Maybe that's true. I don't care. What I care is about the person I'm communicating with. And if I see their eyes moving around, if I see, and sometimes you just have to think about it. If you see a little bit of, the only words I can come up with are like a glazed look or something like that. Or maybe you're just getting the feeling, when is this guy going to finish so I can move on to talk to somebody else? And when you see that, you can do a whole bunch of things they talk about in psychology of communication, breaking someone's pattern, throwing a joke in there. One of the most important things also is the way to get people to listen to you is to listen to them. And when you meet somebody, make sure you have their name. Make sure you pronounce that name properly. Don't overuse it because that starts to sound disingenuous. And there's plenty of people who say, well, I took this communication course and I'm just going to say, and George, when we do this, George, and by the way, George, and you can tell when someone's just kind of forcing it. But you throw some of these things in, listen to the things they're saying and they're not saying. So if you say something like, how was your weekend? And they say, oh, it was great. I went out with the family. Ask them a couple of questions. Oh, the family, you have kids? How old are they? Okay. Or what did you do? Now, all of a sudden, you've got something going on. And it's not just finding things in common, but it's ways to get yourself in tune with the other person and say, oh, you went out to that. I went out to that lake a few weeks ago. I love paddleboarding and I did that kind of thing. And it's a lot of these things that you can bring back and bring back their attention. Because again, Reels, TikTok, short attention spans, that's our culture now. And that's what we have to get away from is these sound bites and really deeply communicate with people, because that's how we have a wonderful interaction with another person, even if it's just a casual conversation, or if you're trying to sell them your product or your service or something like that. So
now, David, that might seem like a minor point, but I when you said, ask them, how was your weekend? And they respond with, well, we went out with the family. A lot of people might just drop it right there. But as you suggested, well, okay, they've opened a door. So, well, where did you go with your family? What did you do? And so now suddenly you actually show real interest in them, as opposed to, and here's a comment. Here's an opening phrase that I detest because it sounds so fake. People say, hi, how are you? They don't really care how I am. And we just met, or they just called me, or they've sent me an email. How are you? Well, I can't really tell you how I am right now.
Yeah.
I don't really care.
And sometimes people have had a horrible week and they say, oh, you really don't want to hear about it. Okay. But if you switch that up, you can just take that and just throw in a different phrase, like we said, did you have a good weekend? Or, hey, what's shaking? Okay, what's new and exciting? What jazzes you this right now? Or just something else, and breaking that pattern of, hi, how you doing? Or, it's really creating that connection. And then, going back to what this podcast is all about, your intended message. Your intended message is going to land when you have that common ground, when you have something going on with that person. Even if you walk in and you have nothing in common when you start with, you'll find something. And that's what's going to get that message across.
And people might say, well, I don't know anything about this person. How do we have anything in common? In fact, we live entirely different lives. We have nothing in common. But the reality is we do.
Yeah. We all have the human experience. We all have the human experience. We're all going through, even if we're dealing with someone in a different country and, the politics or the socioeconomic and those things are different. Ask them questions, and you don't even necessarily have to have something in common. I was on a trip in South Korea a number of years ago. I didn't have a lot in common with a lot of the people I was there with. I just started asking them questions. What is this like? I said, I see this. I was walking down the street and I saw this. Help me understand this. And now, one of the other things I like to talk about in tactile communication is 3 of the key things that I think are key to everything in communication. And that's being authentic, candid, and vulnerable. And right there, you can say, I saw this. What is this? I thought that was really interesting. Help me understand this. Okay. Remember, don't necessarily say, tell me about it. Say, help me understand this. Now you're asking for a little bit of help. You're almost setting a pattern in asking for someone's help, especially if you want to sell someone or convince them of something. And you're now showing some vulnerability, which endears you to people. And Help me understand this. And now people are talking about what they know, and they want to talk about what they know. And it makes them feel good about themselves that they can talk about these things. So in this weird cart and horse kind of way, you're being selfish by asking them questions to talk about themselves. And you're helping them to help you, to help them help you, and it goes back and forth like that. But that's what creates some of that meaningful communication and helping get that intended message across.
David, that sounds like a powerful phrase to use. Help me understand this, and I can see that in so many cases where perhaps we disagree with the person, perhaps we don't understand it, perhaps we don't see their point of view at all, and instead of objecting and giving our argument, we could simply say, "Well, help me understand this."
Exactly. What does fighting ever solve? What does disagreeing? Well, I mean, there's constructive disagreement, but what is this, banging against each other? What does that ever solve? And when you say, well, something, I don't necessarily see it like that. Help me understand what brought you to that point. I want to understand more about that. Now that's giving them a way to constructively explain their point of view. And whether it's, politics or a technical discussion, I think we should use this framework. No, I think we should use that framework. Or I think we should write this ourselves. Or I think we should build versus buy, whatever it is. Help me understand what got you to this point. And you will hopefully come up with, get like a 1 + 1 = 3, because now that's going to make them hopefully want to hear your point of view because you were good enough to hear theirs. And now you come up with a better solution than neither one of you could by yourselves.
And David, another great phrase I just heard you use there, 1 + 1 = 3, which encourages teamwork and working together. On our own, we can only get so far, but together with our different perspectives and different points of views, we can get much further.
Yeah. And in fact, one of the things that I talk about quite a lot in tactile communication is all decisions are based on emotion. Anybody who thinks they're making their decision based on pure logic, they're fooling themselves. Every decision is based on emotion. And getting people and drawing them into your story. Now you're creating some emotion there, some resonating, getting them to feel better down in their gut about what you're trying to communicate. And you're listening to them and they're feeling better about what you're saying. You're feeling better about what they're saying. And the most important thing about this, right? When I had said earlier, the way to get people to listen to you is to listen to them. We need to peel that onion back. And that goes back to some of the magician mentalists, is looking at the audience and their motivation. So a lot of things in performance are audience selection or spectator or participant selection. Now, you don't want to pick somebody who is going to, who looks like they're the person who's going to try and mess you up. Okay. You get, in the simplest case, you get somebody to pick a card and they say, was this your card? And they say, no. Okay. But it is. And they're just trying to make you look silly. What you want to do is you want to look at your audience. And when I say audience, I'm using it in a performance term, but it's anything from the executive you're talking to, the interviewer or interviewee, depending on your role. Look at what their motivation is. Why are they there? What are they trying to get from this conversation? And think about that. And then you start having that conversation and you see how it's landing. And if it's not landing the way you want, now you have that presence of mind to tailor your message real time on the fly. And that's a lot of the things we talk about. We go through role playing and workshops and so on. And what's really funny is I'm talking about being an effective communicator and really connecting with someone. And this is the freakiest thing. And one of the things I like to tell everybody is I break down these barriers. Like, it's okay to think this. It really is, because people are like, oh, I'm the only one who thinks this, and mine must be weird, right? When you're doing this, you kind of feel guilty because you kind of feel like you're not listening now. because I'm thinking about how it's landing and I'm thinking about how I have to tailor what I have to say. But if I'm doing that, I can't be listening. And it just comes with a little bit of practice. When you first try it, it's really overwhelming. And you're like, I'm really not listening. Oh my goodness, I feel terrible about it. But after just a little bit, your brain starts to get accustomed to that. And it's almost like driving a stick shift or something. You don't have to think about it after the first, bit of doing that. And by thinking about these things while you're communicating, while you're listening, that gives you the opportunity to tailor your message. And if it's landing, great, build on it and, just ride it. And if you need to fix it, then you fix it. And it's some of these techniques with a little bit of practice. It's great. And by the way, here's the secret. This is what mentalists and stage hypnotists do all the time. We have to see what's going on with the audience rather than I need to do this. This is what I'm doing. I'm here for the audience. I'm not here for my own pleasure. I'm here for them. And by watching them and how what I'm doing is landing or not landing, then I can make that better for them. And when I make it better for them, I make it better for me. 1 + 1 = 3. And well, there you go.
David, I'm reminded of a networking event that I attended recently. And it was a chamber event. And of course, people are there to make contacts and get more business. And this person is talking to me and he starts telling me what they do. And they were a marketing agency and they did websites and such. And he just kept going through a list of everything they did without ever stopping and asking me if any of this was of interest to me.
Yes. I mean, look, just because you need to say it doesn't mean that they need to hear it. And especially, in the networking events. And I will tell you, hey, authentic, candid, and vulnerable. I'm guilty of this myself. When you're I'm just going to say, if you're in a networking event, okay, conference, whatever it is, and it's a target-rich environment, and you want to talk to a lot of people, sometimes you're talking to somebody and your eyes are darting. Who am I going to talk to next? Your brain is just subconsciously doing that. You need to focus yourself on who you're with 100%. Right. And also, that's also anticipating, and I hate to say it, but how you can effectively have a brief conversation and move on without making someone feel marginalized, because nobody wants to do that. And I will tell you, there are some times where, someone has gotten my attention and they wouldn't let me go. And you know what? It's okay. There's plenty of people. That's also how you feel about yourself. And, eventually, it's one of these things, what goes around comes around. And, you'll wind up getting you may get your intended message out to that person. And they might say, it's not for me, but you know what? I know someone, right? So.
David, you used the term tactical communication.
Mm-hmm.
Is that a process that one needs to go through both mentally and verbally? How does that work?
It's really more of a concept. And it's actually a concept. I mean, the term is something I came up with, but really it's the way I sum it up is it's communication with a purpose and a plan. So what am I trying to get? If I'm trying to get anything out of the communication, if I'm at a party and I'm just, shooting the breeze with a whole bunch of people, hey, great. No tactics in there. You're just having fun with people. But in the business context, in any kind of a context where you want to get a message back and forth, how can I do that effectively? And the word tactics, I didn't want to say strategic, but I liked tactics because I'm planning out before I have these conversations, how I'm going to get these conversations to flow. Some of these things just need to start naturally. The introduction, how you doing? How was your weekend? Everything cool or something like that. How's the weather? Don't want to say that here in New England, but once you start getting into the intended message and how you're going to get there, one of the things, again, I'll bring it back to magic. There's a friend of mine who's a bar magician in Key West. And I do mostly corporate stuff, stage stuff. I do a lot of close-up stuff, the cards and things like that, hospitality suites, weddings, bar mitzvahs. So, that's the fun side of my performance in addition to the business side. But what Frank, my friend in Key West, does, he's a bar magician. He's got the Comedy Magic Bar in Key West. And so many people have been drinking too much, or they're just crazy and gregarious and just, and here, pick a card, and they grab the card and they crunch it up. Okay. Or they really did forget their card, or they'll knock something over or something like that. And Frank has this uncanny ability to bring every situation to a successful conclusion. And that's the analogy that I draw. The tactical communication, you know where you want to go. You have no idea what's going to happen in the middle. What's going to throw you a curveball? If they're going to get a phone call, if what you're saying is not resonating, if you know where they need to go and where you want to take them, and for some reason it's just not happening, how can you figure out how to bring that to that successful conclusion? Get them where you need to go. And sometimes, here's another magician's trick, and that's actually one of the things that I do is, I don't necessarily say, here's how you do a magic trick. And you don't have to learn how to do magic tricks, but it's that some of those concepts. And there's something called time misdirection, where something will happen and then there's a huge amount of time before things come back around. And a lot of times, when you're sitting in the audience of the show, you don't really realize that. I mean, I will, because I've been doing this stuff forever. But this goes back to some of the core things about tactics and communication. Something I talk about quite a lot is credit. Make them the hero. Make it their idea. It doesn't have to be your idea. If you've got them where you want them to be, in hearing your message, in making that decision or going down that road, it doesn't matter whether it's your idea or theirs. You're getting the conclusion that you need. That's the tactics. So you might plant the seed and say, we're not going to close this conversation today. You say, part of the tactics is, let's talk again in a week and a month. There was a project I worked on a while back where my VP did not want to go down this particular technology path. And the whole team, we agreed. I said, guys, this is where I want to go. Is this where you want to go? And they said, oh yeah, this is the right way. We've all come to this conclusion. I had to get the VP to do it, and I was not going to have a fight with him. So what I wound up doing was I talked about it, and he said, I don't like it. I don't want to do this. And then after a couple of weeks and after a month, he started asking me about it. Pretty soon it became his idea. Did I care? No, I didn't care. Who cares about, if you care about the credit, then that's going to be a hindrance to the communication, because that's something else you're loading on top of it. So a lot of these things are just self-awareness. And again, coming from some of the performance aspects, right? Some of the best magic tricks are the ones that happen in the spectator's hands. They happen in my hands. Hey, he's doing sleight of hand. He's doing something funny. If the whole thing's happening in your hands, I'm not doing anything, right? So, all of these things roll into the tactics of communication to get from where you start to where you want to get that conversation to be.
The one I'm hearing there is, especially with the comment about make them the hero.
Mm-hmm.
If you're leading a team, stop pretending that you're the smartest person in the room.
Oh yeah. Oh my goodness. Some of these things, and I pull a lot of quotes from movies, because there's a lot of prophetic quotes in movies. And there's some really funny ones that I will say in person, but I'm not going to say here. But some of these things, they can come off as disingenuous. It's just like saying the person's name back to them at the end of every other sentence. It starts to sound disingenuous. This goes back to authentic, candid, and vulnerable. Just be yourself. Don't try and be what you think somebody else wants to be, because you're never going to get it right. You just be a nice person, a positive person. Let them have the credit. If somebody says, hey, that was a great idea, say, you know something? we did this together, right? I wouldn't have gotten to this if it hadn't been for this conversation. All of a sudden, you just gave him credit. It's authentic, it's candid, and it's not disingenuous. And, oh no, this was your idea. I mean, some of those things, you want to make sure that you're just people. And so many people feel they have to put on airs and just, behave and act a certain way in a certain situation. When at the end of the day, we're just all people. And that's what's going to make you that relatable, that authentic, candid person. That's what's going to make them, here's another magician's secret. That's what's going to make them want you to succeed. When a magician goes through some things, all right. And actually I wrote a chapter in a business book called Mission Matters. And one of the things that I talk about this in there, sometimes magic tricks don't go believe it. We want them to go. Okay. Been there. We all crash and burn. So how do you handle that? And where do you go from there? Now, when that happens, even the biggest skeptics in the world, they feel bad for you and they really want you to succeed. So the next thing you're going to do. So sometimes, here's the secret, we'll mess it up on purpose. Just to do that. Now that I've given you that secret, next time a magician says, oh, that wasn't supposed to happen, you don't know whether it was planned or not. So I really didn't give you a secret. Okay, which makes it a whole heck of a lot more. But did he plan it that way, or did it really go that way? And then combining all of that with giving people credit, sharing that credit, the time displacement, if you're not immediately connecting with that message or where they're going, and you want to bring them back and you take the time to do that. All of those things together wrap up into tactical communication. So there's tons of these concepts. And again, that's what we do in the keynotes. We do a bunch in an hour and a half, multi-day workshops and stuff like that. We do a lot of role playing, but this just gives you a flavor of all of these things where we can take some of the perspectives that I've learned as a performer and apply these into business. And I've made massive strides in my career. And a lot of the successes I've had, I looked back and I said, oh yeah, I was doing that, wasn't I? Because I just happened to learn it. And it really came to a head for me with tactical communication 15 or so years ago. I was doing it. And then I was contacted by the graduate psychology class or program at Harvard, because I'm in Boston and they know the magic community. And they said, we would like you to come and show some of our classes how con men do their things about perspective and communication, how they hide things. And while I was preparing that, I said, this is really cool, because now I'm realizing how this is coming together in every facet of communication, not just performance, not just trying to take advantage of somebody, not just politics, which again is arguably trying to take advantage of somebody, right? but all these things together, and that's what started the ball rolling about making this into a method and a program and being able to teach this stuff. And it's been really successful. I've been really happy with it. I get emails sometimes from people a year later saying, you talked about this. It was just a 1 hour presentation and this just worked. And in fact, a couple of weeks ago, time flies, it was October. I was doing a 3-day workshops, a couple hours each day. It was like 2 hours each day for a couple of days. And the second day, we got together and I said, all right, let's take the first 10 minutes. I want to know, let's recap about what you took away from yesterday. What resonated with you? The first person said, well, look, we still had most of a business day after we were done yesterday. And I tried this. They said, oh my goodness, I can't believe how well it worked. So, when I start hearing that stuff, that's what jazzes me. I love that stuff. I love when people's eyes light up and then they can make use of it. So.
David, for people who'd like to learn more about tactical communication and how you might help them, the best place for them to find out is at your website.
Yeah. My website's actually very easy, and sort of putting it on the video and the links here. But www.davidreich.com. And actually we've got another, if you just want to, dip your fingers in and, or dip your toes in, I guess, fingers or toes. There's another page that's a derivative off of that. It's davidreich.com/tactical communication tips. And I've got an infographic out there and some other information about tactical communication. You can learn some stuff right there in 5 minutes. And, if you want to talk more, if you couldn't guess, I love talking about this stuff.
Mm-hmm. And you can find those links in the description below. David, as we prepare to wrap up, mm-hmm. if you could sit down with a business leader, a team leader, mm-hmm. who's maybe new to the team or building their team, developing their team more, and if you could speak to them from your magician experience, mm-hmm. what 1, 2, or 3 tips would you offer them so that they can be a better team leader and communicate better with their team?
So the first thing is, I've been a manager on and off through my career. The first thing, and this is what I said when I interviewed for the role, where they said, what are you going to do on your first day? What changes are you going to make on your first day? I said, none. I said, I'm going to listen. I want to watch and I want to listen and hear what's going on. And that goes back to what's your audience motivation? What's the people you're working with? What are they unhappy about? What are they happy about? Even if they don't articulate it, you can just watch and see. All right. The next thing is it's kind of a derivative off of that is if you're in any kind of a context of sales or something like that. By listening, sit back and really think about what you're observing, because many times you will figure out their needs, their wants, their desires, even before they know what they are. They can't necessarily articulate their needs, but by listening and watching as an outsider, that's something you can do. The other thing is, as a leader, okay, if you talk about a business executive, and I'm sorry if I offend any business executives who are watching this, the number of times I'm super excited to be here to talk to you about this. Okay, right? Kind of cringeworthy, isn't it? Or when they tell, some tired old joke to break the ice. Say something that resonates, make it personal. Just make yourself relatable to the team. Some of these business leaders, they feel like they have to create this separation. The most effective leaders are the ones who are the most relatable. And, when you hear what they have to say, it's coming from the heart, it's real. And again, it's not about the executive or the speaker. It's about the audience. It's about the teams who are listening to that person. So there's a couple of things that I would.
Valuable tips there. My guest today is David Reich, reminding you to be authentic, candid, and vulnerable.
If you like what you heard, tell your friends and post your 5-star review on Apple Podcasts, because that helps more listeners find us. Come back every week for more practical insights to help you deliver your intended message. I'm your host, George Torok.